In the darkest night, we find our light. Battered souls, but we won't lose sight. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial, we carry on. Surviving together, we stand tall. United forever. Strength and courage will overcome. Oh, surviving together, victorious, never, never alone. Hand in hand, we'll face the unknown.
We see you, we hear you, and we believe you.
Hi everyone, how you doing today? You've landed at Surviving Together, a safe space for trauma survivors. Excuse me, let me get my words right. A safe space for trauma survivors to get together, a chance for them to join together, build community on their healing journeys, as well as providing trauma-related education for all. I usually do that a little bit smoother, so you can listen to some other intros where that's a little bit better. Hi, Crystal. Hi, Kevin. Welcoming both of you here today. Sending out lots of hugs and love for Crystal because I know that she has a major procedure coming up, medical procedure coming up on Monday. So let's send lots of hugs and love out to her because this is a very important surgery for her emotionally and a very invasive procedure as well. So let's wish her all the best on Monday, as well as sending all of our hugs and love out to our friend Misha, who is starting the trial of her daughter's alleged murderer on Tuesday. I believe jury selection starts on Monday and she'll be there on Tuesday. So send a big, lots of hugs and love out to her as well. And Carmel, how you doing? Without further ado, though, we do have a guest today and I want to bring her up. And anything else I have to say in regards to just general channel stuff, I'll leave for the end. So without further ado, let us welcome Miss Carrie Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Awesome. So glad you could join us today. I really appreciate it. I know as we spoke before, this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, being in the legal profession myself, and also working obviously here with trauma survivors. We're going to speak a lot more about the meat of what you do, but why don't you just tell us what your current position is, and then just kind of start us on your journey of how you got into working with trauma survivors in the first place.
Yeah, so currently I'm a consultant and trainer to law enforcement, to victim advocates. I work with civil attorneys, I work with therapists, I work with AI companies, basically anybody who works with victims and survivors of crime and trauma. My path is interesting. I'll tell you how I got here.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I really loved watching basically coverage of court hearings, trials, the mainstream narrative of the 90s, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and everyone, really talked about the evidence and all those pieces, the defendant. But I was always interested in the victim or the surviving family of the victim. I wanted to know what was it like for them? Who was helping them? Who was answering questions? It was always about the defendant and their rights and what they're going to do. But
Oh, she froze a little bit. We'll wait half a second. I'll interject while she's on involuntary pause. That I think that that's fascinating, right? I mean, how many of us have watched like Law and Order or, true crime and have really wondered about what has been going on for the victim or the victim's families. But I'm going to drop her down and then maybe bring her back up and see if that helps for her. Hey, I
Hey.
dropped you down and brought you back up. You just temporarily froze. I was just saying while you were involuntarily removed from speaking that I think it's fabulous that those were your thoughts. Because how many of us, I was saying, has watched like Law and Order, like Special Victims Crime Unit or murder trials, and have really sat there and wondered, huh, I wonder what this was like for the victim.
Yeah, it's a very unusual thing for a 9-year-old to think about. I mean,
Yeah, definitely. But how empathetic of you. I mean, really, that is truly showing like your character colors early as to
yeah.
how you feel about that. And so where did this go?
So the obvious idea was I was probably going to go to law school, because it was taught to us that if you wanted to work in criminal justice, if you wanted to do those pieces, either be an officer or be a prosecutor. So that's what I kind of assumed. I went through college. At the very beginning, I landed an internship at my local district attorney's office.
Hmm.
That was hard to get at like 19. They really made me work for it because they were so concerned about putting a young person in there, and maybe messing up things or something like that. Uh,
Interesting.
so I got in, and it was supposed to be 6 months to a year. And I fell in love with the work. It was working directly in the victim assistance unit. So
Okay.
I was working with
Yes.
people coming in, the general public, going to court hearings. It was fabulous. I just loved it so much, and I got to understand the different roles within the district attorney, and more
Yeah.
so what the attorneys actually did. So a lot of people know a lot of people have an idea about victim rights and what it's like if you become a victim, but the actual services and the actual answering questions, it's less the attorney, and it's what's called a victim advocate. So once I figured out, okay, I don't actually want to be the attorney, I want to be the victim advocate. I stayed there for 4 years, unpaid, throughout college, just absorbing and going to court. It was great. And then this was in a very bad economy, 2010-ish. So they're like, yeah, we can't. I know you're graduating, and you'd be a great asset with. I had a women's and gender studies degree, so I understood a
Okay.
lot of those pieces. They
Yeah.
can't pay you. So I left and did some marketing and started a family. And then I found my way back. I found my way back and became a victim advocate for the same district attorney's office.
Wow.
And
That I did not know.
yeah,
It was the same
I
the
was
same
back.
people.
Yeah, they were happy.
And
They could finally pay me. It was great.
right, right. Yeah, hey, we have some income extra, so would you like to work for us?
And it worked out well because the job that I had prior to that in marketing, the whole time my boss had a situation where her child was a victim by a family member, and I was more focused on that. I didn't care about the sales and everything else. So it was kind of obvious to me that I need to make my way back to a victim assistance program in some way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to stop you there just for a brief second. I'm going to combine two different things. One thing you know about and one thing you don't. But for information, general information for those who may not understand, a prosecutor's office, we have the attorneys who are the prosecutors, and they are the ones, once the police report comes, the prosecutors are going to make the decision as to who is actually going to get charged. And then they will go ahead and handle, pretrial and trial and sentencing and those sorts of things. A lot of people, a lot of prosecutors' offices then also have what's called separate victim advocate unit, or sometimes witness victim advocate. They'll combine the two. So whether you're a witness at a trial or whether you're a victim of a crime that is being tried, there'll be somebody who's always in contact with you, letting you know what's going on with your case. If you have to come to court, when do you come? You'll meet with the victim advocate, talk about, maybe the prosecutor needs to prep you for testimony. They're going to help you with that. And they do a lot of hand holding, really, right? It's And it's extremely important for the victim and for the victim's family to have that kind of support. And I want to applaud you for all the years that you did that type of work, because we know here how critical that type of support is. Because I thought this trial was coming up next week, and I'm finding out from my chat that it was this week. A member of our community, her daughter was killed in a domestic violence situation. And it has been many, many years trying to get this man to trial. And apparently, he faced trial last week and he was found guilty. And I do know that the people who were working with the prosecutors in the prosecutors unit there for Misha and her family, um, to be able to come to that trial that was a culmination of so many years of fighting to get this case, heard and seen. And we're going to speak a little bit about that. And maybe this is a good time to speak about that before we switch over to the education piece, is talking about the legal barriers that there are for survivors and kind of what they face. And we can kind of meld into then, you know, what type of characteristics of attorneys might they face. And then when you come in and when you educate them, how does that transform kind of their view of looking at the survivor and speaking to the survivor? So maybe we can start there a little bit about what you have seen for in regards to the legal barriers of survivors bringing their cases, what their struggles are, and you know what can be done to make that an easier process for them.
Yeah. So with prosecuting attorneys, I think that's maybe what you mean more so about prosecutors and within the criminal justice system. Um, Victim rights are important, but a lot of people view them as something they have to do. There isn't this, maybe there are some that still have that empathy in them, but a lot of times it's another task to be completed. A
Mm,
lot of attorneys that I've worked with, they're so focused on their trial. If they're going to trial, do they have to go? Can they get around it? And when they are in
yeah,
trial, it's tunnel vision. It's all about the trial. They're not
yeah,
thinking about how that affects the survivor, the surviving family members. This has
yeah.
uprooted their entire life. They're being thrown into a criminal justice system and they don't know anything about it. And then when they ask a question, they're being treated like they're dumb, like they're a problem, that they're interrupting everything. And the truth is they're not. We're
Hmm.
asking so much of these people. We're asking them to be a very significant piece of this trial against the other person, the defendant, and we're still acting like the defendant is the center of the attention.
Right, right. Because for a prosecutor, when they get involved in that situation, I mean, they're about the conviction, right? And everything that we need to do to secure this conviction. And anybody who's kind of outside that, or even witnesses who are needed, especially even the victim, yeah, can kind of be as almost like an afterthought. Or just how do you fit into my puzzle?
Right.
More than looking at they're the linchpin of this whole thing, and being able to. Do you find that the attorneys at all, prior to any sort of education, um, have any insight as to how to speak to survivors to lower the incidence of retraumatization, being able to speak to them or interview them in a nonlinear way, that we find is more effective? Do you find that any of the attorneys have any of these skills? Maybe they don't know that they do, or they're doing them and they don't know that it's trauma informed type of skill.
I think there's many that do, and I think it's particularly the ones that are they've made their way to work on maybe domestic violence specific cases. A
Mm,
lot of different attorneys' office, they have different units.
Mhm.
Less the smaller offices in smaller counties. But the ones that I've worked with, some of them have a domestic violence unit just for that piece. Some have domestic homicide attorneys
Mhm.
directly just to
Mhm.
work on those. And those individuals, they understand the different pieces because they're living that work. It's all about those
Yeah.
particular cases. And their training, so the ongoing training they have to get, the CLEs, are focused on
Yeah.
that piece.
I was just gonna say, you find that the attorneys who have been put then into these, whether it's sex crimes or whether it's domestic violence type of situation, that they have then more training in this area because the office knows that they're going to be, working with survivors. And if you don't tend to get that type of training. And we were just speaking with somebody from law enforcement last week, and that this was kind of the case for law enforcement as well, that there's some basic information that was like, he works in Central Texas. And so there's some basic information that they got with the police academy, but it was nothing special. It was just kind of generic. And we were speaking about, and he became part of the human trafficking task force for their county. And so with that, he got this training on being trauma informed. And he said, oh my gosh, you can't unsee what you see now that you know. And it, for him, it was this paradigm shift of how he viewed people. And I think for anybody in the legal process, whether that's cops, whether that's, attorneys that are working for this, that judges, everybody can benefit from being trauma informed, because you've spoken with attorneys who are then working in this space in the civil context, right? And this is an area where sometimes people fall because their criminal case fell apart, couldn't be prosecuted for whatever reason. Maybe the statute of limitations on the criminal side is already run, and so a civil option is their only way. This is, basically privately suing the individual is their only way to seek some sort of justice. So you've been working with some plaintiffs attorneys who are kind of specializing in this area of working with survivors as well. And have you found that on the whole they have been a little better informed?
They're much better informed. And I have to say that there's a couple different pieces. One, their business
Hmm.
relies on them being the top of their law firm, their jurisdiction, their state, because ultimately that's how they earn a living, right?
Hmm.
Um, there's also less red tape. So when you have a civil law firm that's working on, let's say, sexual assault cases, and they hear of a conference coming up, they know that they just asked to go. Or honestly, they have enough money individually, they can just say, hey, I'm going to go to
Yeah.
this conference. They get to go. They don't have to ask for permission. They don't have to explain why. They don't have to come back and write a summary of what they learned, all those different
Hmm.
pieces. The incentive
Yeah.
is very different for the civil world versus those in the criminal justice world.
I want to ask you a few more questions about that, but because we broke kind of in the middle, why don't you take us a little bit on your journey from when you got back into victim advocacy? We squirrel around all the time over here,
Me
so don't
too.
worry about it. Hey, we have people on the spectrum, we have people off the spectrum, we have trauma survivors with spectrum indices. Is that even a word? I think I just made that up. Indices. So don't worry about any of it. So you got back into victim advocacy work, and then you had this career, and you eventually ended up opening your own place. So take us a little bit through on that journey.
Sure. So when I went back as staff, I started working on financial crimes first, documenting restitution, which a lot of people don't know what that term is. I'll just briefly explain it for the group. So it means when somebody or an entity is out financially due to a crime. So there was this grant through the state, and I worked on that for about 14 months. And I actually really enjoyed it because I worked with a lot of DV victims, a lot of sexual assault victims, talking about what their financial loss was and trying to um, put them in a position of getting resources, state funding for medical,
Yeah.
explain to the attorneys the significance of a survivor having her phone damaged and what does that mean coming up with $900 trying to get a new phone,
Seriously, right.
or her credit is already shot because of what the abuser has done, that she can't even if she had that money, she has to do an additional down payment with Verizon, things like that. So I
Yeah.
really liked that piece of blending the truth of the financial piece to domestic violence because no one really talked about it. And that kind of
Yeah.
became a foundation of what I started doing. But in that time, the other things I did was I was the volunteer coordinator. So we were a small group of advocates, 5 probably at most, which that's not a lot of people. My
Mhm.
county is probably maybe 3 or 400,000 individuals.
Mhm.
Um, and we found that there's a lot of individuals that needed protective orders, restraining orders, stalking
Okay.
orders,
Yeah.
elder
Mhm.
abuse, things like that. So we had a clinic. It had been going on for years before me. So I took over training for the clinic, finding volunteers to come in and assist individuals, keeping them in the know about the different pieces of trauma, what we learned from group discussions. When we go to a conference, we'd have guest speakers from other nonprofits, so they understood more what was the general public dealing with when they came in. And
Mhm.
it improves services, people sitting through those protective orders but actually being heard, because
Yeah.
if they didn't have that, they didn't have money for an attorney, they were going to fill out that
Mhm.
paperwork on their own.
Yeah.
And then eventually I took over a lot of training. I started training other advocates, and then I started training the new prosecuting attorneys in my office and then others throughout the state, which that was unheard of. Why is this lady without a law degree doing this? Like, well, I'm the only one offering to do it.
Right.
And then I
Right.
started going to the law school and talking to the new law students about victim services. And then when they'd come in and intern for the prosecuting clinic, I gave them a few trainings. So it just kind of turned into, I really like talking about what we do and why we do it and how we can all do this better. How can we make a better impact? How can we um, lessen the traumatization that individuals have? Because a lot of people found out that although they've experienced abuse in some fashion, it gets worse when they're thrown in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
We're having people
Yeah.
leave and they feel worse, and that's not what needs
Yeah.
to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's heartbreaking when I hear different people's stories that they said, I tried, the they didn't really believe me, or they said there wasn't enough evidence, or and just everything that gets to them. And if that can be, if those conversations can be done in a trauma informed way, even if that person can't get criminal justice, they can still leave feeling better than they do at this point. Most of the
Right.
time, I'll say most of the time, right? I mean, because there are good ones out there. So, what type of information did you find? So, eventually, you started your own company and
Yes.
started doing trainings and working with different organizations. For the attorneys in particular, what type of information did you find was most helpful for them that they needed to know?
So I made a presentation. I had it on the conference circuit for a few years, and that's the piece now that civil attorneys often hire me to be a part of a particular case or to provide training. And it's really talking about, it's called victimization of the working poor. So a lot of people don't realize how many individuals have everything else going on top of why they're in the criminal justice system. So Alice is a term that we use where people, basically in short, they're living paycheck to paycheck. And what does
Mhm,
that mean? It means that at
mhm.
any point in time, they could lose their housing, they could lose their well-being, they can lose all these different pieces. And what we found is having that sitting in the back of your mind on top of being a victim is not good. And we have these
Mhm.
attorneys that come in who have, great suits on, great clothing, nice bags, thinking about
Mhm.
everything on their own. And they're not realizing that they called in this person, this victim witness, to come in for, let's say, a grand jury at 8 in the morning. That isn't happening till noon. So they're sitting there. They're usually not up maybe at that time because maybe they work later in the day. Because they sleep in at a different time, they don't usually eat breakfast. So 90 minutes in, they're hungry. They don't have disposable income to go look for food at the courthouse cafeteria or like a food truck nearby. And what
Right.
happens when you're hungry and you start getting irritable and then you don't have anything, maybe you have medication, you need something in your system, and then panic turns into anxiety. So
Mhm.
we talk about all those different pieces about what we're not considering individuals and how this impacts them from every different piece. So I talk a lot about the history of of the working poor. In
Mhm.
my state, Oregon, it's very, very high. We have almost probably at this point half of our population. Well, maybe
Oh,
more like
wow.
maybe 45%, but say not.
Still, dang. Yeah, wow.
We have a lot of people on Medicaid health insurance. We just have a
Mhm.
lot of people that aren't, they're barely getting by if they are. And how many of those individuals become victims of crime because that's just how the world works. It isn't anything significant about what they are doing. But we talk about too the different pieces about individuals being vulnerable because they don't have income for daycare and they leave their children with someone that they trust and someone takes that trust. And
Yeah.
how does that play out when you're talking in court and you have a jury that looks at this individual and is blaming them for what
Mm.
something someone else did to their children. So
Yeah,
really
right,
trying to
right.
humanize, I mean, we should be humanizing our people in general, but really talking about all those different pieces because again, as we have attorneys that are doing this work for so long, they're slowly they're forgetting all that. They're forgetting any struggle if they had any, right?
Mm.
Um, they're living in kind of like this bubble.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of lawyers in private practice can get that way. Um, and the farther removed you get from the problems of the people that you're representing, the harder it can be to connect with them. And I think it's important for us to discuss that some of these things that we're talking about with that are really important for attorneys to know are just that much more important for the civil attorneys because they don't have the victim witness unit, right, to do all
Right.
that extra stuff. So they really need to be doing that and taking that internally. I'm starting a new job on Monday.
Congratulations.
It's Thank you. It's still temporary, but it's 6 months plus. So we'll see. But I will be helping a law firm handle sexual assault legal claims that they're doing. And so I will be working with those claims and working with the victims, working with the survivors and talking to them about their claims. And I've done this before in a different context. And so I'm really excited to get back into it. And I'm really, really curious because there's like 1 to 2 weeks of training beforehand. And part of it's, we have to learn their computer system, and then there's a whole app we have to do for phone calls because we're going to be on the phone all the time. But I am so curious to see if there is a trauma informed education piece for this because dealing with this extra work that they have from this, so they're bringing in a lot of new attorneys to this case, I should say. And while though I know that in the interview ad, they wanted people who had, a victim rights leaning, you know, any type of work you've done in that kind of context. I don't know how many they ended up, maybe they just personally felt, a pull to this type of work or something, or, who knows what we're going to have. So, anyway, that's kind of gone off on that. I've been thinking about this for days. I'm so curious to see. And as I was thinking about this, and I'm like, Carrie, I may be calling you up because
Absolutely.
I we may have a company that, really needs to have their people trained a little bit better. So we'll see what happens with this. Who knows? That's one of my goals with this is not only being able to provide platforms for people who are doing work with survivors to speak about it and to let people know that the wonderful advocates that we have out in the universe, but then also to help connect you guys. If I can through something that I'm doing, that I can help connect you and I could say, hey, I've spoken with other guests and I'm like, you know what, you and this guest are doing complementary things in kind of the same space. And maybe you guys should hook up and talk. And so, all I can do is kind of make those introductions and pass information along. But, we'll see who knows, we'll see what happens in that. Um, do you find this is kind of my biggest thing that I find, and I know I've spoken with a lot of police officers in regards to this, but in terms of your either what you include in your training, how you uh, how you find the lawyers beforehand, or even how you find them after they've received this training, is there are there pieces that you include specifically in regards to them being able to connect better with the survivor and to speak to them in a way that isn't re-traumatizing?
So in small trainings, ones where I'm brought into a program where they're hiring me to do that,
Mhm.
we'll do role play. And
Ooh.
they hate it. They absolutely
I
hate it.
bet. I bet.
I hate it. I really don't like it either, but it comes down to that's what needs to happen. I
Do
also
you know the words that should come out of your mouth, right? And when you have to form them, and you're like, "Yeah, are these the right ones?" I can see how everyone's there going, "Shh, I don't want to be the first one to say anything."
and I provide a lot of stories. I mean, I worked in total 13 years with the district attorney under three different DAs when they were in their capacity. So I have a lot of stories and I have a very interesting memory. So I will just share things about times the attorneys did or said something, and we talk about it like a classroom where we go through and dissect why that wasn't a great idea and what that caused for our survivor. And it's interesting when I'm telling a story, and I changed the names, but about
Yeah.
twice someone knew who I was talking about.
My gosh.
Like, well,
Wow.
it happens, but really kind of going through because people generally, officers, attorneys, I always like to believe that they want to do the right thing. It's
Yeah.
just that they don't have the capacity. Why don't they have it? We need to make some room. The training, um, and also, are they burnt out? Is it time for them to work on a different unit for a while? Do they need to do something
Yeah.
else? Because the responsibility of working within the criminal justice system is if you cannot serve your role, then you got to go. I mean, you're not
Mhm.
entitled to anything. A lot of them like to stay because it is a cushy job. There's times where you don't have a lot to do and you still collect your paycheck and you get your pension. And those are perks because you are going to be responsible in your role. And when you can no longer carry it out, then it's time to do something else. And I
You know,
usually I tell them
yeah.
that too, and you can see oh, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the legal profession in particular, obviously, for attorneys being one. And think that we speak a lot in our profession about, if we, some people have the need because of the way that they are, or just there is this assumption, that you will have a disconnect between the victim and yourself because you have to compartmentalize it, right, in order to do these cases long term. And if you're working with survivors on a regular basis, long term, I agree with that to an extent. But I think that, especially as lawyers have worked with survivors for a longer time, whereas you may find in thinking of like maybe especially first responder type roles, I think that they are a lot more likely to recognize when they're having burnout, A, that they're having burnout, and B, because it's blah, 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 because it's of this vicarious liability. See, I am an attorney. Vicarious trauma that they're exposed to and that they're internalizing and that they're not dealing with it because they didn't know to deal with it or how to deal with it, right? And so I think that maybe that they can be fooling themselves in getting harder and separating their feelings more and not recognizing, guys, burnouts, it's in any profession regardless of what you're doing, but especially, even in the law when you're dealing with victims on a daily basis. I mean, anybody who is dealing with survivors on a long-term timeline needs to know about vicarious trauma and how to protect themselves and take care of themselves as well
Yeah.
before they are at that point where they're affecting this, really affecting their cases, because they're going to affect the survivor and how they talk to the survivor and how the survivor feels about them. And you know I think it's really critical for survivors who are going through some sort of legal process to feel comfortable with the people who are advocating on their behalf. Um,
And that also
because they'll,
kind of,
they'll
I think
shut
what
down
you're
on you.
talking about too is the culture within offices and law
Mm,
firms.
there
What,
can be, yeah.
who are they hiring and what are they teaching? And we know for a fact that law enforcement and attorneys in the system, they drink. They drink quite a bit and they use that as a coping
Fortunately.
mechanism. And we see a lot of individuals who it turns into an addiction. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'll say that's the big difference too. And I'm glad that we kind of gotten this point is with civil law firms, with at least some of them that I've worked with or they've attended my training, they
Mhm.
are very good at giving themselves time off. So when there's a case, they went to trial, they're like, all right,
Mhm.
trial's done. I'm taking this much time off. And they can, right?
Mhm.
Because they did billable hours, they did all those things. So financially they can. And their celebration isn't bottles of alcohol. There isn't a basket of that on their desk. It's going and doing their own piece with their own family and friends. That was a big piece that I talked about for a long time. I think in my early trainings, when I was still training within the system at the state, is every function we had at my old office, there was always a bottle of alcohol. That's what was in the gift baskets. That's what people were raffling off. And when someone won a trial or something went well, they all went out after work. They went out and
Right.
they drank. And the a lot of people don't know, probably don't know if you don't work within the system, how close prosecutors, defense attorneys through the public defender's
Mhm.
office, police officers,
Yeah.
they're like their own little community because
Yeah, the whole judicial community, except for the judges, because they can't. That a whole
yeah.
appearance of impropriety thing, they've got to be very careful about who they associate with outside of
And
the
I think
courtroom. But
that's good too. Um, but they all see the same thing and they all have a similar work, so of course they're together. And then now you have 3 different entities, all, Nestle having these bad coping mechanisms, and then they're off Monday working on another case. So there's that piece too about the culture, and that's another that actually is part of my victimization of the working poor too, is when you're hiring new people into your prosecuting office, who are you hiring? What are you asking of them? And I always start off that particular presentation about myself, because there's no doctors in my family. There's no lawyers. I'm the first to go to school in my family. I had one officer. My great grandfather was a motors for LAPD for a long time, and I knew him for a little bit. Um, he actually lived for quite some time, so that's how I knew him. And then my grandfather worked in the city of Los Angeles, but my parents didn't go to college. So that aspect is, I walked in, I saw things very differently. I didn't
Hmm.
feel part of that group. I tried.
Yeah.
I tried so hard, and I didn't want to go out and go do the things they did. I didn't mind going to dinner occasionally, but I wanted to talk to them at work and, gossip about whatever was on TV, and I wanted to go home to my family. So that was a big piece too, and I bring that up a lot in when I go to conferences, because there's so many new individuals who are coming into this line of work, whether it's nonprofit or like advocates within the university system, who they're looking around and they're hearing people talk, and they don't feel they don't feel that connection, because it's like two different worlds.
Yeah. And I think part of it can be, some of these law firms that have been around for a really long time that are kind of entrenched in the way they do things, and they have really strong cultures in terms of how they do things. And then you've got companies, law firms who they're newer, or you have a prosecutor's office who is run by somebody who's younger. And I think they're, of course, more open to work-life balance and what that means, and protecting the mental health of the employees. So I think that things are changing somewhat on their own, just because of the people and the generations that are coming in. But you certainly do have some of these law firms that have just been entrenched for a long time. And as somebody in the legal profession, I can attest to it that, alcohol is the number one coping mechanism in the legal profession. And it's extremely unfortunate that, I think in law school, just like I think in the academy, there needs to be a course on trauma informed education, a course on anti trafficking, a course on domestic violence, a course on, sexual violence. I think all of this stuff needs to be taught, right? At that level, I think that there should be something in regards to it in law school as well. They have made so many strides since I've gotten out of law school, and it's been, Jesus, 25 years now. Holy Christ. It's been 25 years since I graduated law school in a couple months. And, you know, in that time, law schools have really taken on expanding their electives and allowing people to say, take an elective just on how to do depositions, and, an elective just on how to run a law firm, all those other things other than the law that they don't tell you. All of these different, very specific things that, so many of them, I'm like, God, I wish I had that when I was in law school. I would have rather taken that than, what I did or whatnot. And I think a piece on trauma informed education and how to talk to survivors, how to talk to victims of crime. I think a whole piece on that would fit right in. You could do a 10-week course and, talk about human trafficking and domestic violence and financial abuse, and you can throw in elder abuse and just anybody who might be victims of crime, and come at it from a trauma informed education standpoint, right? And then we're catching them before they're making it into the system, and being able to tell them, listen, you may encounter different cultures out
Yeah.
there, and this is what you need to know. I mean, this is how we should be treating survivors. And if this is something that aligns with you, if you find yourself either interviewing with or at a place of employment that doesn't, I mean, you've got to then decide for yourself as to, is this a place that I want to work? Is this a place that I could effectuate some change at by helping to bring in some education? And I think the more lawyers that are going into it with kind of their eyes open that way, um, you know, they could really start to help effectuate change from the inside out, whether it's bringing in people like you, whether it's just passing the word in terms of, oh, hey, this is what I learned in law school, here's some information, or whatever it is. um, because we always want to focus on how do we make things better, right? And I think that that's one way that we could do that for the legal system in general. um, and then having advocates like you who are working with these people and trying to get them to understand there is there's a way to there's a better way to communicate with your survivors. Crystal asked, maybe there should also be a course on positive coping skills in these different areas so they know how to better deal with their own mental health. There's so much burnout. And that is so true. And I think you could incorporate a piece, on that. I think that they could have a whole separate elective, really, if they wanted to, on like what it means to be a lawyer. When do you realize that you're not being effective anymore? Um, because people don't talk about that. I mean, generally here in my county right now with attorneys, we have a problem of them not retiring. We have so many 70s and 80-year-olds who are still working, and bless their souls that this is what they actually, that they want to be doing. But there are a lot of them that are just kind of stuck in their old ways, and they have certain ways of doing things, and they're not going to be changing. And so that's, kind of tough when we're not getting a turnover in the county of some kind of newer blood being allowed to rise up, because we've got a lot of these old timers who are still sticking around, and they're very marketable because they've got skills. They've been already doing this for 60 years or 50 years or whatever, right?
They've been doing this for
People are
70
like,
years.
yeah, exactly. You've been out of law school for 3 and he's been doing this for 50. Then you kind of go, oh, you're only $200 and you're like, 1,000. Okay, you get what you pay for then, and you kind
Yeah.
of gotta balance those things. But yeah, from an improvement standpoint, what is the one thing or couple things, if you can't just put one on it, that you wish would change the most when it comes to survivors in the legal system?
The one thing that really needs to change overall is believing victims and survivors. Just believing when they come forward. And often the criminal justice system, we're meeting them because law enforcement and the police report, and they come in, they maybe need a protective order. In the civil world, they're looking for another way to get accountability and sometimes civil justice because the criminal justice system did drop the ball. But ultimately, overall, law firms, civil attorneys, criminal justice prosecutors, the public, the media, which I'm really on the media on my social
Mm,
channels about their part in this. But as a culture, we don't believe victims and survivors. We
so
blame
true.
them. And it's such a historical piece. And that's
Yeah.
another training that I did on the circuit for some conferences about the history of that, about women's history. And oh, that was bad. I mean, it was good content, but
Yeah.
people were mad. And I'm like, this isn't just, don't think of it as you individually. This is what we're raised in. We have these beliefs that were
Yeah.
created They were given to us by our culture, by the media, sometimes family members, and we take those beliefs and it goes to work with us. And that's why we see victims and survivors not getting the resources, why we see family court making such horrible calls with children being abused, putting them with the parent who was abusing, seeing
Yeah.
protective orders not granted. Overall, that is the biggest piece, is people either don't want to believe them, they've been taught not to, or they just don't want to deal with it. I hear a lot of that. Well, that's a lot for me. It's like, no, you can just believe a person. It totally changes your outlook. It changes how you can help them when you're not sitting there going, I think they're lying. So yeah, that makes people angry, which I love when people get angry because it makes them think. So I really push that a lot. You gotta start with believing them. And that if you have that, it goes so well.
It's heartbreaking to me to hear you say that. Totally not surprising, but heartbreaking that even in the judicial system that we're still hearing this is a significant issue, right? Because this isn't something that we've been fighting for decades, and it is better than it was.
Yeah.
We'll give society in general a little bit of a credit for that.
A tiny bit.
A tiny bit. But yeah, I mean, socially, I think socially we're struggling right now. We're really struggling. And I think that when you have these cases, you know, especially what has been being, drug into the light with the Epstein files. And I'm not going to get into it because I don't cover the Epstein files here, but just when you start getting cases like this, and we saw this in the 80s, when we like with the McMartin trial, when you had people being accused and you had more and more cases. It seems like the more we highlight cases, we have to be careful in the general media, because it's like if we highlight too many cases at one time, people are like, oh, there's so many of them, some of them must be lying, right? There's this kind of belief that if too many people come out of the woodwork at some point in time, they can't all be victims. And that's so not necessarily the case, right? I mean, we know that the chances of people false reporting are extremely low. And I just covered a case. I can't even imagine what it's like to be in France right now. I just covered a case of another pedophile who was arrested after 50 years going at it. 50 years, never been arrested for anything, had no criminal record. 50 years, 9 countries, 5 continents, 89 boys. And this is the third mass abuse case that they have had in the last 2 years, France. Third. The other one was almost 100 victims, and the other one was one victim, 51 defendants. So for them, they are in this upheaval portion of going from what they want to consider rape culture to consent culture. France is really, there's been people who have taken the reins with that. But I wonder in the US, if we were to have like two major cases break like that in a 2-year time period, I don't know that the public in general would be sympathetic to each and every case.
No. I would say though that the Sean Combs case was that was about 2 years ago, and that was big in the millennial generation, my
Mm-hmm.
generation. That was big for us because we all grew up with Sean
Yeah,
Combs, playing on the radio, and then we had Epstein, which has kind of just been, it's been going and going, and we're going to hear it for a
yeah,
long time. But with the Sean Combs case particularly, the blame. there was so much blame because how could the man that, made the music for our parties, how could he have done that? So everyone was looking for a no, this can't be real. And the thing is, I always tell people it's up to you. If you don't want to listen to that person's music because it affects you, then don't. But if you still enjoy that song, it doesn't give you the ick, then listen to the song. It doesn't matter. But people really took that personal. And I spoke a lot about Sean Combs. I worked with one of the civil attorneys on that piece as well. Even after I spoke at a press conference, I had someone go through my trash, and I had breathy phone calls at 2:30 in the morning. And then I was named in some. I had part of what I said in a lawsuit with another entertainer, and I didn't know that until recently. It was just it was insane, the amount of, because of who he was, the power and the
Yeah.
cultural influence. People were very, very wanting to find out what did the victim do to contribute to that. And that's also the historical piece of, a lot of people say, karma, everything happens for a reason. We have to get away from that. People,
Yeah, because you made bad decisions in the past, you deserve this
that's what
somehow.
a lot of people honestly believe. Well, you chose to do this. It's like no one chooses to be abused. No one does. You live your life and
Yeah,
someone takes advantage.
and I think especially when we start talking about these bigger stars and whatnot, and there's just, I almost feel like we've gotten to a point with society where it's not that they don't believe the victim, it's that they don't want to.
Yeah.
Because if they believe the victim, then there's all this other stuff that kind of has to be true in their life, right? About either how they feel about the defendant, say if it's Sean Combs, how they feel about his music, are they going to continue to support him? I mean, we went through this in the 90s with Michael Jackson, right? When he had
Yes.
his trial, right? It's exact same thing in terms of how people were feeling about the alleged abuser. Um, and I'm glad you brought that up because it was I saved it for last because I wanted to go out on that. But talk about gals, guys, everybody, sassy community. This woman was involved with the civil attorneys who were working on the Sean Combs case. How in the world did that come about?
Well, I mean, I was covering on social media. I was covering Sean Combs for, I think everything kind of came to light in May 2023 when the media was really reporting on the different pieces, when his homes were getting raided. And
Yeah.
I love to cover the power and control piece because ultimately that's the foundation of abuse. So that's where I talk a lot
Hmm.
about, if people can understand that's power and control, that's how you can identify abuse. So I was really covering it, and I had a lot going on about it, and I was following as attorneys were speaking up and saying, hey, we have clients who are saying that they were abused by Sean Combs. And I'm watching the numbers and I'm like, okay, we got this attorney, we got that attorney, got Gloria Allright. I'm like, I love her, I know her. We got Lisa Bloom.
Right.
And then the shark of Texas, Mr. Busby, was like, oh, I got more than a couple. I got like 150. And I just thought, how? You got 150. So I reached out to him and I sent him a note. I'm like,
Amazing.
this is great. I'm so happy that you're doing this. This is important. And I heard of the firm, and I know that one of the gals in his firm, Crystal De La Torre, she she's been handling sexual assault cases along Busby for a while. Like, they're a very knowledgeable law firm. So I sent him a quick note online and I said, let me know what I can do to help. And he got back to me and said, come on down, yeehaw,
Oh
something like
my
that. I don't
gosh.
know. Come to
That's
Texas.
that is just wild.
Yeah.
You must have been flipping out when you got a response email from him about that.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
It was
Well,
it,
congratulations.
thank you. It was great because when I met him, you see these people in the media and you're like, okay, what are they like? But him and several of his attorneys, I didn't meet everyone there. Um, they wanted to do the right thing. And that's what I'm really on top of. Like, all
Yeah.
the other pieces, the money, the lights, and all that, it's about doing the right thing, about making sure that this individual was held accountable. And you get
Mm-hmm.
to that point when you stop giving a shit personally, and when you
Mm-hmm.
have some resources. So I mean, that really kind of changed my perspective too, and that's when I started going, okay, we can change, we can get the civil world going, because we know the criminal justice system, it's a great one, but ultimately it doesn't work all the time. It's working
Yeah.
less and less for survivors. So that changed, I think, my perspective on what we can do. And I started thinking more about, like, okay, if I can get the civil world, if I can get the public, not just me, but everyone together, if we can really start bringing attention to these pieces, to survivors, in some day we're going to make enough change. We're going to get more people to understand
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. And then,
Absolutely.
social media is doing it on its own too right now, with everyone kind of understanding what recently the files have brought up. People really taking another look, and we need something like that. We need an upset, not only in the bigger world, in the companies we do business for, the entertainers we like, but in our home, thinking about what what would happen. Like, what does this mean? We know the numbers. How many people do I personally know that are affected, that aren't speaking up because they've heard of something I've said, or something that was posted online, where they don't feel trusted to come forward.
Mm-hmm. I think that is kind of an incredible important piece for just us in general as members of society, is remembering the power that our words have, and that anytime that you're saying something um, about trauma, about survivors, about victims of particular crimes, you need to be careful, because you never know who's around you and who's listening, or your best friend could have been through something and you don't even know, and you've made a joke about something that you maybe found half humorous, you know, but you still made that joke. And that person's like, I don't know, I was going to talk to them about that, but I don't know if they'd take that too serious then, right? And you
Right.
may be the best person to talk to, but you made some insensitive joke. So I think that it's extremely important that we are aware of our words, we're aware of our positions, that we as a public, right, open our eyes to these types of issues, and that's why we have to keep talking about it, that's why bringing you on the channel, and giving you this platform, and the work that you're doing on a daily basis is just so incredibly important. So I thank you so much for being here, Carrie, and talking to us about this. This has kind of been an area that we've been talking about for a while, only because of me, because of my. So when I found you, and I'm like, education with attorneys. Oh yes, I need to contact her.
You're like the only person that thinks that's exciting. That's okay. Like you and two other
I,
people.
exactly. It's what we do. We're just kind of a little odd anyway, but that's me. Hey Rick, how you doing? Glad to see you. Well, guys, I do not know if I actually linked up my outro again. I didn't have it last time. So if we just kind of end and it just goes, sorry. Uh, but Carrie, if my music plays, I will email you. I will follow up in an email. If my music does not play, you're welcome to stay for half a second and I'll talk to you afterwards. Okay. But thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed having you. And yeah, keep in touch. I'm so excited to see, what is on the horizon for you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everybody.
All righty, take care. My finger went bloop bloop. I don't use the touchpad all that often. Is that obvious, guys? Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Oh my gosh, I owe Misha a phone call. I obviously have been in my own little world. A guilty verdict for Misha. Oh my gosh. Thank you for telling me. I Yeah, I owe her a phone call because I was gonna reach out, and I was on Tuesday of next week. I'm so glad you guys told me. Uh Congratulations. Let me just say that. Congratulations. So hugs and love to Misha. My goodness, I'm going to be giving you a phone call, girl. Um, Hugs and love for Crystal. She's got her procedure on Monday morning. Lots of things happening around here. Yeah, next Monday, I misspoke. Next Monday, the 30th, is when I start my uh new long-term temp job. So very excited about that. I will, Crystal. Yeah, Krumel mentioned that she talked about it last night, so I was gonna look for whatever she did. But her post Day and Ned's from last night. Okay, perfect. I will definitely watch that. I will also give her a call. I feel horrible that that's such a major thing, and I totally got it off a week in my brain. Um, but that's how things are around here lately. That's how things are. So anyway, let's see. What do we have coming up again? Sorry, guys, I'm hurting today, so I'm kind of a little bit as I readjust as we end here. Wednesday. Okay, our next show. Oh my gosh, Wednesday next week we have Louis Greek with Truckers Against Trafficking. TAT. TAT. I'm so excited to bring you guys this guest. This is part of our human trafficking series, and he is going to be talking about how they are educating people in the sorry, sorry, my back. They are educating people in the transportation industry on how to stop human trafficking, how to identify it, how to report it, how to help. And that is just going to be a fascinating conversation. Wonderful organization. So with that, I'm going to say adieu. I love you guys. Remember, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are loved just the way you are for who you are. So hugs and love from me, surviving together, never alone. Bye, guys.
Through the fire, through the rain, we have walked through endless pain. But we stand, we rise again, stronger now, we break the chain. Surviving together, hearts open wide, lifting each other through every tide. The past may have shaped us, but it won't define. Together we heal, together we shine. Every tear, every scar tells the story of who we are. Not just survivors, but warriors too. With love as our armor, we see this through. We see you, we hear you, and we believe in you. We see you, we hear